This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, special guest Eric Ferrer-Vaughn joins us to talk about network states.
Woo! Welcome to the Sound of the Future with Joey K-Meyer, because this is what I hate doing this intro every time, but this is what an executive producer and UWork CEO Jess Vander sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess.
And this is what a special guest, aka DJ Sandbox, aka Eric the Snowman, aka Eric Ferrer-Vaughn sounds like.
Vocal blessings to you all.
I forgot one of the AKAs once I got to that point, but there are more. AKA Leche, AKA...
Yeah. Leche caliente, specifically hot milk. That was
a
story for another time.
That really... I missed the caliente, but I like that better. Welcome to the show, Eric. Obviously, you know that we keep a clean house, so there's no housekeeping. Rate, review, subscribe. 5 stars, 5 stars. Phone a friend. Tell a friend. Email your mom. Write a letter to someone telling them about this show with a cassette of a recording of it included. Start an email chain letter that forces people to send it to 5 other people to tell them about the show.
For a
just do
raffle
that.
of your friendship.
Or just bad luck. Just like a bad thing is going to happen to you.
Yeah,
like,
just karmic justice if you don't. Just negative incentives piled on.
If you don't tell 5 people and forward this email, then you will have public GI issues, which no one wants. So that's exactly how we want to bring people into the fold of this show. With threat of public GI issues.
Yeah, chain letter, Ouija board vibes.
Oh my word.
Exactly.
So if you want to avoid all kinds of personal disaster, you should highly consider some kind of passing along of our show.
Also, feel free to be creative in your chain letter creation. You can go with classic routes like people's car warranties are not working, the Nigerian prince route. Feel free to take anything that feels best for you to get people into the show with fear of some sort of cosmic reprisal. With that,
thank you.
We have topics. Eric has a topic today which I think is adjacent to our most listened episode in the past. Hints, I don't know. No hints. Eric, hit us with what you've been thinking about.
Yeah. As a recovering eco-modernist, tech exceptionalist, American, whatever, I have been fascinated still recovering by this idea of what are theories of everything, theories of change, and how can we redesign society from scratch. Now, I have been on the boat of following whatever most persuasive person and whatever their idea was for most of my life. So this is how democracy should look. This is how organizations should look. And the most recent stop on this was this concept called a network state. And so you basically take any civilization, any group of people to build a brand new country from scratch, but start online first. And so like the principle
Sid
here,
Meier? Are we talking like Civilization 3, 4?
Yes. 5? These people are inspired. This idea is inspired from total control of all space. But the difference here, and this was kind of unlocked by blockchain, was this idea that, Web 2 disrupted media, disrupted Hollywood, but Web 3 is disrupting laws and governance and civilization. And so some of the first ideas that kind of come out of this network state idea is build your country online first, pick a topic, pick an issue that you're all rallied around, crowdfund physical territory in the real world, get a lot of money, buy land everywhere. And then my favorite part is get diplomatic immunity from the existing nation states. And boom, you've created a country.
1, 2, 3. Simple as that.
Because the inevitable, you win one army and someone then attacks your said country that you made. But I'm interested in this concept because the idea of creating a utopia or a commune or hiding out and just trying to build your ideal society is getting harder and harder. And so how do you build these kind of archipelagos around the world that start online first around real issues and then use blockchain to kind of recreate laws and contracts to kind of build a society that we want within existing societies. And so I'm excited to explore with you all. One, on this idea, first question is, would you join a country that started online first?
This makes me think of a bunch of things. The first is sort of the 2-book universe that Neil Stephenson created with Snow Crash and Diamond Age, where everything is run by franchises. But the second thing that it makes me think of is, as someone who grew up in New Hampshire, the Free Stater movement, which was a bunch of libertarians trying to band together to all move to one state to be able to take over state government. And I think there may be multiple Free Stater governments, but New Hampshire was one of the targets where they're like, we just need 50,000 people to all move to New Hampshire and all vote, and we have that thing locked down. In some ways, it's sort of interesting, like this idea existed before Web3, not to say that it was fully fleshed out, or maybe there are other better examples where people have done this, but it's interesting to see sort of older ideas refreshed within this construct.
Also, to back up a little, whose idea was the network state? Like, where did this come from? What is this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so this is where my alarms kind of went off. So this is from the CTO of Coinbase, or former CTO of Coinbase, and like serial entrepreneur out of Silicon Valley. His name is Balaji Srinivasa. He's almost like crypto royalty. Like everyone looks up to him, everyone trusts him. And it's this kind of old tech culture of, if we can disrupt it, we're going to. And so he is, and this is where I get a little worried, is some of the things that he kind of cares most about is kind of free speech. So he's like, I can't do the things I want to do in Silicon Valley, or I can't do it in America. And so how do I create a new thing where I determine the laws, I determine who's all in, how we spend our money, how does private property work? And then I get someone else's military to protect me. So yeah, it's out of this crypto trying to build a new world and thinking it's tech as like this completely neutral, ethical piece that only innovation can kind of get us out of the world's problems today. So Coinbase CTO, Balaji. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the second follow-up is, when you say like diplomatic immunity from existing nation states and or having a military, do you mean like a military? Like, what are we talking about here that is digital and what is physical?
Yeah, I'll use one of his examples, which I thought was really funny. He wanted to create, one of the examples he gave was called Keto Kosher. And so he said, get a bunch of people who want a sugar-free society to meet online and give resources about how to be sugar-free, different things like that. Find land, buy land, crowdfund land, and they're really big on like, go to the metaverse and look at the architecture and experience what our country could be like. Then get that said land so you can create your own FDA to say that we will only accept these foods within these borders. But this is where it gets a little troublesome. When he talks about kind of military, it's all Boston Dynamic robodogs, drones, automated weapons, where it's almost this kind of doomsday preppy thing where it's like people are going to attack us. So how can we have as much automated defense as possible to then protect this said one issue that we care about? So yeah, it is Palantir, Lockheed Martin, like let's use tech in any way possible to protect our sovereignty.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to think about to what extent one needs to go to accomplish the vision, right? Is total sovereignty from a nation state level required to accomplish the thing, right? Or can it be accomplished in sort of smaller scale sort of versions? I'm thinking about like the Hasidim in upstate New York. What is it called? That basically has sort of largely a completely independent, I'm trying to type, and Kiris Joel in upstate New York. It basically is sort of this thing. It is like an island. It still exists within New York State, but there have been a lot of sort of political fights and different things that have happened at different points on like local, county, and state levels where they're, you know, essentially what they're asking is for a level of independence to like manage the way that their kids go to school or the way that their tax dollars are being used in their area. School is one of the areas where a lot of the fights have happened because they are like a Hasidic Jewish Orthodox group that want to have control over what their kids are going. So like some of the fights in the past have been like they pulled out, they were doing things to like completely defund public schools because they were not being able to control the ways in which their kids were being educated. So they just wanted to defund public schools for everyone else so that they could take that money and put it into something else. But like there are sort of some of these examples where you're able to create independence. Like even the idea of, you know, if it was done in the US, of being able to like create a new state or something, maybe like it's still a really high bar, but is less intense than national sovereignty. Like, but thinking about like what are the conditions that you would want to create that might demand something like this? And I could be you know, naive to the ways in which people are thinking about it. But like, right, if you're thinking about something like, you know, keto kosher, like, do you need a nation state to do that? Like, you could probably have it with like a township, right? Like,
yeah.
Or like an empire. Age
or go further.
Age of empires. No, well, like I guess I think the thing I still am trying to understand is like what is the role of the physical space here, other than what I guess, you know, maybe this is the question, Joey, you're probing on, is like how important is total sovereignty? Like what is the goal of this type of exploration / settlement building? Curious.
Yeah, so the villains he sets up in the book, which it's an interesting way to publish it. The book is completely free and it's also open source, so you can add, and it's pretty interesting. But the villains he sets up are woke capital versus Chinese control versus Bitcoin, or like the crypto future. So his he's trying to provide a third alternative to woke capital being the American establishment and, the New York Times, all of these large, just kind of how America works. But this, he has these future predictions and simulations that basically America's going to be green versus orange, not red versus blue anymore. It's basically everyone who's next to capital. And what are you thinking, Jess?
I just made me think of that time where there were like alien teams. Do you remember that, Joey?
No.
Do you remember where there were like two types of alien teams? There's like blue and yellow aliens, or we talked about this at one point.
Oh, it was in Grand Theft Auto. There were like these crews that emerged of like the green gangs versus the purple gangs, and they were just like messing with each other. Yeah. That was like alien team. There was an alien gang too. That's where it came from. Got it.
Yes. Basically,
Sorry,
just
Eric,
think.
please.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Just think Elon Musk and all of his political friends. But then on the other side, he puts Chinese control, where it's like China's going to use AI and their version of society is going to be complete top-down surveillance state. And then he sets up these two things. No India, no Africa, no other countries. Those are the only two.
Got it. The only that exist.
Futures.
Got it.
And then he's like, and then the rest of us, we're all going to need a new way of governing and having ourselves together. And he's saying, just to start out, we're going to organize ourselves by one issue that we care about. He calls it the one commandment rule, where it's you pick something you care about, whether it's sugar-free society, or he had another one called internet-free society, where it's just like people who want to have space away from internet, and you can build the physical space to also reflect how you care about this single issue. And you could travel around the world, go to all these different places. And yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of disagreements on like the enemies he sets up, but I think the heart of it is, so I'm based in Compton, California. And when we talk about sovereignty in our community, it's so abstracted, so opaque that it's hard for people to even know how they can even build a new justice system, a new education system, new credential systems. It's like, how do we even do that? Like, we're so beholden to the Constitution, and like his actual language on here is he says someone forks the Constitution. Like, he's a CTO. Like, he thinks about everything from like a very technical standpoint. But I'm interested in this point. It's like, okay, what are the technical capabilities to, if you wanted to rebuild a society from within a society, is the tech ready to do that? And then the other piece, which is, I think the hard part, is like, how do you start to educate people on this to even want to join something like this? Because it's a big hurdle. Like me going to my mom and saying, can you download a Bitcoin wallet so we can start this new country with me?
You're like, okay. Well, this is the thing that's so funny is like, I admit when you bring this topic up, like the first thing I am thinking is like, sounds culty and sounds like someone's like fun exploration who has like too much money and too much technical power. And then at the same time, I also think like, when was it 500 years ago that like everybody had to be thinking about like all of this exploration that needs doing around our Earth, and like, or a flat our Earth at the time, and like what the altitude of questions to be thinking about of like, what if I wanted to go start my own country was like totally viable at that time. And it is interesting to think that hasn't, not that hasn't been a thought in recent history, certainly like South Sudan's existence for, like this is a thing that happens, but usually like partitioning based on what we have in terms of physical spaces, and that we are now at a frontier where you could be recreating nation states based on ideological lines as opposed to yet unfound territory. Like now it's like a different, I don't know. It's just like that is a curious question. And we I haven't thought about that. I feel like most aren't thinking about that.
Yeah, the things that I wind up questioning in the process are the motivations of some of the people who are driving some of these conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I'm like familiar with Balaji in so far as like seen things and takes he's taken on Twitter and stuff like that. I don't know a ton about him, but like he fits into this cohort of sort of libertarian oriented technocrats that are like ultra wealthy and like give me the sort of like John Galt heebie-jeebies a little bit, right? Like that he's sort of an Ayn Randian of like, I made my wealth and I don't want to share it with other people because I don't have total control. And so those sort of motivations, sort of like, what are the issues that you have with society, and is the way to fix it like new sovereignty? Like maybe, like candidly, I mean, I can't say that is or isn't the answer, or is it just because you want a new system where you have more control? Like what is not happening right now for him that he wants to do it? You know, a lot of like Bitcoin maxis or Ethereum maxis have this sort of militant approach of like, I believe in Bitcoin and I invested early, so I'm going to do anything I can to make fetch happen. You know what I mean? Like that sort of idea of like, well, if we create our own new nation state, then because I was early invested in Bitcoin, I will be like the king of the castle type of vibe. And I'm like, you know, in the same, we briefly spoke a little bit about some, like when you were sharing this, I shared like some of like Saudi Arabia's Neom, like Neom, that I just get spammed with ads for Neom. I don't know if I'm like why I'm getting them, but I am. And you know, like the line and some of these things that they're starting to create are a different approach to trying to create new civilizations that aren't sort of Web3 dependent, but are being like, okay, what's, you know, version 4.0 or 5.0 or whatever 0.0 we're at of society, and taking this sort of like, what was, you know, Neom like sometimes feels like retro futuristic, like of, you know, cities built up into the sky and hover cars and things like that. But, you know, if the basis of creating this, you know, network state is just to not be told what to do, it sort of it like degrades the integrity of the thing potentially for me. Like he's not talking about like what happens post capitalism. He's like, I don't want to be bossed around by woke lefties in capital and I don't want to live in a panopticon of China. But it, you know, it makes that sort of false assumption, like you suggested, that there are only two options.
I have two quotes that I wanted to read to you guys. So one is related to, and I didn't say this, but all of these network states are startups, because that's the world he comes up from. They have to have a founder. He says, one quote is, a founder is the best kind of leader because they have the legitimacy associated with building an organization from scratch. And so they all need founders. So
they all need founders. Got it.
There's never been any problems with founders that I've ever heard of.
Sounds like the king of the
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then his utopia, like where do we get to, what problems get solved? Yeah. He says, I prefer a stable world where we can focus on mathematics and getting to Mars more than the chaos that is already ensuing. So that was his, not hunger, not health, but just like, I just want to focus more on math and getting to Mars. So we can just do this to get there. And so there's this disassociation from
reality.
So it's like reality, but also it's like Web3 is powerful. Like you're getting to the point where you can, and his whole thing, like the whole first part of the book is about history. Whoever controls history has the power. So he redefines history. It's like, this is what history really is. This is how you really need to look at it. But he's like, the blockchain, having a historical ledger, you can do so much with that. But he takes that and immediately, like, how do I solve the problems that me and founders and engineers, because those are the only characters in this story. Not doctors, not nurses, not mothers, not childcare workers, not elder care workers. It's just like engineers, founders, tech people. And so it's like, here's how we finally create our ideal world. Very metaversey in a way, where I heard that the recent Mark rollout of the metaverse, he was the main character in the metaverse. So it's like, that's one way to do it. So I don't know.
I saw things from that and I thought they were fake. Honestly, like I didn't like dig deeper. I just saw like screen caps and I was like, this is not real, right? Like
yeah.
So it turns out it is real.
Yes, but I'm curious, how do you both filter through when you can clearly see where the source of information comes? Like, do you guys give up? Do you stick through it, try to get the nuggets out, try to get the truth out and stay unchanged? It was very hard. I'm like, I love this idea, but I don't feel like this is the best person I should be listening to about this idea. How do you guys navigate things like this?
I mean, I think I try to hang on to the ideas, but there becomes a point, I think sometimes, particularly in the age of the internet, where ideas become quickly inextricable from particular communities, right? And I feel like we're sort of in a tenuous space with some of Web3, right? And the issue with Web3 has been, the conversation has been about financial decentralization and new ideas for being able to distribute wealth and control, and ideas that, you know, in theory, those ideas are things we need socially, right? Like a new means of redistributing wealth, whatever. Mm-hmm. But the reality of almost everything that I've seen come through on Web3 has just been like highly capitalistic, highly cash grabs, highly like get rich quick types of schemes. And so, you know, I don't think that means that then those technologies are irrelevant, but what it means is people may develop an aversion to those technologies as a result of the messengers and the early programs coming through, and maybe a sort of punctuated pause in adoption, like even if a good idea were to show up, because everyone's scared of the schemers now, right? What about you, Jess?
It's tricky because people smarter than me and dumber than me are probably both thinking about these types of questions, and it is intimidating for me for both of those reasons. I think, you know, the part of this idea that is interesting and exciting to me, Eric, is that is the promise of like, what would be something that would be enough of a draw for people to like rethink about like their, like how even someone like describes their nationality. Like way back in the day, it was like a land grab of exploration. More today, it is more a matter of like ideological and like and also just like cultural and societal like divvying and how do you best represent the people that are inside of your state, and drawing physical boundaries for those things are really difficult. And so the question of like, what could this new version offer that we do not presently have is an interesting question. And I think that is where, your point, Joey, though, about what are the motivations of the people starting these countries is so critical, because it's like that defines what you get out of this. And maybe you don't get much other than the desires of this small group of people, which isn't really adding anything particularly inspiring. In fact, like I think a lot of people, even today, think romantically about what if I got up and moved to a different country where I just think everything is run better, and they still don't do that. Like the hurdles to change your nationality and like up and identify with a different country, or the way you said it, I think, Eric, was like join a country, which is such an interesting idea. I just like I can't yet imagine what it would be, but it is like thought provoking.
I think the baby step is we're already a part of a lot of communities, whether they're online, in person, where we have these large user bases, a lot of capital, a lot of ideas, a lot of skills, a lot of talent. But there's not that next step of how do you make this group actionable? How do you make this group official? You can go and be an association or like a collective. You can go through the American route. But I think the baby step here is there are ways to use blockchain and Web3 to start to capture how much power and value we have. Whether we need to go create a country, I agree. Like I don't think we need more borders, more like drones. One of the quotes I said, like, Bitcoin can win a human war, but it can't win a robot war, because it's just like there's robots everywhere. I don't know. I don't think we should go that route. But it's like at least this idea of, hey, we don't need your accreditation system anymore because we've created our own, and it's peer reviewed and we believe it. Or hey, we don't believe in one of his things is like he wishes the FDA just didn't exist. He's like, drugs should come out faster. People should do whatever they want. Okay, cool. But now you have a new way to like do your own regularization in a small space. So I think it's this open people's minds to saying we have these laws and these systems that we exist in, but the technology is slowly but surely coming around where we can build a new rule of law to support our specific issue. Yeah. Country's a jump. Country's a huge jump. Yeah.
That's part of the issue I have here, is that even the Silicon Valley mindset is not around how do you use a technology to solve a societal ill. It's how do you use a technology to 100x your value, right? And so I was having a conversation with Stephen Ebert, who had been in the show in the past, used to work here, and we often just send random things we're encountering to each other. And he asked me over the weekend, I think, had I encountered zero-knowledge proofs or multi-party computing, and I was like, oh, I don't think I have. And he was explaining it to me, and I was like, oh, like this is interesting about where some of the use cases are, like how are people using it right now. And like instead of using it to sort of some people may be using it to help solve like pay inequity as an example, right? Like the way it's set up, and I won't try to explain it because from a technical perspective, because I can't.
I can try.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually like a really cool video that I watched. I think Wired did it, where a computer scientist explains zero knowledge proofs at like a kid level to like various levels of expertise.
Love it.
And I am definitely like the kid level, and I'm still probably gonna be worse than that. But all right, preface aside. Basically, how do you prove that something is true without explicitly revealing that it is true? And in this video, he does this like really cool example of like showing like a map, and like the piece that he has like matches this piece of the map, but you don't show any other part of the map. And it is just like, it's really interesting. And it has like a lot of potential applications in authentication, security, like plenty of things where you don't have to reveal information to establish trust.
Yeah, like some of the cases are around like if you get a bunch of people together in a room, like you can even do an exercise where you write your salaries down on a piece of paper, but you write it on 3 different papers that sum to it, and you share a piece. Doesn't have to be your actual salary, but you can get the average in the room, and so you could use it for pay scale equity in job markets and things like that as an example. How is it being used in a technical perspective today? It's largely being used for like money laundering on blockchain, right? Like you could argue it's around privacy, but like the use case is, has a lot to do with like money laundering, right? And so these instances where there's a piece of tech, right? Like blockchain, one of the early use cases that people talked a lot about outside of like supply chain control and things like that, where you can sort of track an object from manufacturer to like on the shelf and in your home, was around medical records and the ability to have control of your medical records, see it yourself, allow you to follow if you don't like the doctor that you're going to, whatever, like easy access to those things. Like those types of instances are not where these things are getting used. And so even in these like sovereign states questions or network states, like what does that look like if you're able to use that same thing in unionization efforts or other efforts that can sort of amplify a movement that is not technologically enabled now to do better? And so like that always sort of, right, like there's a version of a network state that you could create that is around green energy adoption on a societal level that is either, you're paying in and it's smoothing out sharp edges across all members using it as like a really like example I'm making up right now. Like someone can come up with better versions, or creating some network state using the technology that creates sort of like a susu where people's homes are being outfitted or retrofitted with green energy, and eventually it'll land back on you. Like, what are the ways that you could use those technologies to focus on a problem? And the people that have sort of the money, technical capabilities, and connections to be able to make those things happen are people like Mr. Srinivasan, who are using it to try and be like, I don't want to pay my taxes, like it's not about how do I take this thing and solve a problem. It's like, how do I buy the Constitution, like Constitution DAO or whatever.
Yeah. I think if I had to share a final thought on it, I think I am challenged by the idea that like changing our world today, trying to solve the problems of today, will not be solved by redemptive violence. Like we're not going to fight our way out of this or even vote our way out of this. That there's only like 2 options, and I don't trust the first one. Just like some big paradigm spiritual revival, like we find a new, deeper truth of the meaning of life, and everyone is just like all on board, and you change everyone's minds.
Assembly space.
Yeah, we can go there. But this other piece, which I got from Daniel Schmattenberger from the Consilience Project, this idea of using exponential tech for good. Because tech is like, if we don't have these conversations where the Balajis are just kind of determining the narrative, they're going to take these beautiful technology and push it to this capitalism 4.0 space. But I think something about disrupting the institutions of control and having that be publicly shared, co-owned is one of the last few spaces that, you can be fake news if we have the real news on record, and determining what the actual history and the actual reality is. I do think there's something super powerful there. But it feels like the window's closing. Like this technology is moving really fast, and who drives is determining the fate right now.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about Balaji compared to I think it was Mike Cannon Brooks, who is one of the founders of Atlassian, who is trying to buy the power system in Australia to be able to convert it to green energy by just like buying the coal plants, right? He's taking his wealth, buy the coal plants, do that, right? Like the technology to convert to green energy is there. There are just not financial incentives necessarily from the people who hold the power. So jump in, buy it, create that forced change versus talking about creating like techno-sovereign states is like how with the amount of wealth, like human capital that Balaji has also acquired and the connections he has, like those things could be oriented towards solving some of these problems. And maybe like for me as a layperson and a naive outsider, I don't understand how that's necessarily happening, but I like the Atlassian founders approach better of just like use the weapon that's been used against us as a cudgel against the people who were hitting us before, like not actual redemptive violence, but like twist the system. I don't know.
I think you're right, Jess. I think we need to play this out on Civilization and pick the different factions and play this out on the game.
That is
Jess,
the
you
key
want
way
to
to
do
test.
the wrap-up corner? Can you do it? What is the wrap-up corner?
Can you?
You always do. I'm always stunned. I'm just like, this was a big one.
Gosh. Eric, aka Caliente Leche, aka other things,
yes,
has introduced to us anyway, to me, this idea of the network state passed along from the CTO of Coinbase. We are not sure how much of his motivations and his thoughts we feel great about, but we are interested in this side point, maybe a core point, but it goes haywire. But this idea of what does it even look like to take advantage of technologies to rethink our civilizations, maybe in game format, but also maybe in real format. And how do we take advantage of that, whether it is by creating countries or just doing good things for our society? How can we keep the good parts and maybe do away with the bad, because some of those things are really inextricable? And a lot of people, maybe a lot of tech bros, are spending a lot of time thinking about this question, but should other types of people be considering the potential of our technology? And I think, Eric, you said it nicely and if we don't, like, that opportunity to consider what can be done with these things may be taken out of your hands. So for anybody who is following any of this, if you have cool ideas, I don't know, it's worth putting them down. Crypto, blockchain, network states. Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production brought to you by Zero Knowledge, proofs where you know absolutely nothing but still try to make a point. We would like to thank so much Eric. Thank you so much for joining. You are our revolutionary in residence and spiritual revivalist. I'm just using some cool things you've said at one point. We'd also like to thank sound engineer and exponential technologist for good, Alex Contel, programming coordinator, and the fastest moving energy ball, Les Jacobs. Production help from our network of incredible force. Sorry, Gilbert and Norm Mesterton, as always. Sorry, Elen. Special thanks. Eric, who do we have to thank?
To the silk at the end of blankets that is really soft.
Oh,
I love those.
Is that like a tassel or?
It's just like a around the whole edge. There's just like a silk edge thing. My mom used to do it with the plug-in warm blankets. I'm a big blanket fan, so just keeping us comforted over all these years.
And thanks to your mom for keeping you comforted over all these years. Shout out to moms. Shout out to parents in general. What else? Shout out to the smell of a room being pleasant. There's just nothing like walking into a room that smells good.
Also, shout out to the hawks that live in cities. We have a lot of hawks that attack birds in our neighborhood. And I love birds, but when you see a bald eagle in the middle of a city, you feel something.
But, meaning like they're doing great work? Or, wow, such carnal instinct.
Just the circle of life.
Yeah.
Circle of life in the city.
Thanks, hawks. That's great. And thanks to you, listeners, for always having an open mind. That's what we're here for.
Love it.
Well, Eric, I think we're done.
We did it. I wanted to say Jess Jones. I wanted to throw that out there. That was my nickname for you. I didn't have an opportunity to give you a nickname. So,
but now I have one.
Jess Jones and Joey Fatone is what I wanted to say.
I don't know what that means, but I like the sound of it.